Healy is a licensed counselor with a passion for helping Christians live healthier lives, emotionally and spiritually. Each episode combines the truth of God's Word with practical advice to help you in your everyday life. Whether you want to grow emotionally, strengthen your faith, or handle life challenges with more peace, this podcast is for you. We're so glad you've joined us. Let's get started.
To God be the glory. Welcome back to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast. I'm your host, Healy. Today we're going to be finishing up our talk on grief. I will be talking about what prolonged or complicated grief looks like. How do you know if you're in it? And also, I will talk about some practical ways to move through the grieving process in a healthy way. So let's pick up with our conversation where we left off last time. Sometimes people feel like they're in this stage of prolonged or complicated grief, like they feel like, oh my gosh, I think I'm stuck. But really, if you look back and go, okay, like maybe Christmas came and something happened that really reminded you of your loved one, and you're just like crying for 2 days or something like that. And then we think, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in grief. I'm never going to get out. But really, you have to look back and it's like, how has this whole past year been? Am I reacting in the same exact way that I would have 6 months ago or a year ago? Just because you have an intense emotion at a point doesn't mean you're in complicated grief or prolonged grief or that you're stuck in one of the stages. It just merely means you're experiencing a point of grief. According to the Center of Prolonged Grief at Columbia University, and I'm going to quote this here, prolonged grief is a grief that continues to be intense and pervasive, disrupting everyday life for longer than a year. People experiencing prolonged grief often describe it as feeling stuck in grief or frozen in time, as if the death has just happened. Grief dominates their thoughts and feelings, making it difficult to think about or concentrate on anything else. The future seems bleak and empty. They feel lost and alone. Relationships with loved ones flounder, as does their own health. So you'll see that is pretty extreme, right? And most people, after a year, although they still may be grieving, they have improved their functioning over time. And so there is a small percentage of people that are in prolonged or complicated grief. Sometimes prior trauma or a loss, or if they've got history of anxiety or mood disorders, insecure attachment, or being a caregiver of the deceased, maybe they've experienced lack of support or some violent cause of death. That is when prolonged grief is going to be more likely to happen. You lean one way when you've had these things happen. You're going to lean that way, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you're for sure going to experience prolonged grief. Like if you've had, maybe your loved one died a violent death, you're going to lean toward the way of that could be prolonged grief, but it doesn't 100% mean you're going to experience. You are going to have a intense grief, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be complicated or prolonged. A lot of that depends on your resiliency skills, how well you've done in the past with losses, what you've learned through those, your personality, and I also believe it has to do with how healthy your relationship with Jesus is. Columbia University actually has a self-assessment for prolonged grief, and I'm going to put that in the show notes. So if you think, I'm having some of those symptoms that I mentioned, then just take this self-assessment and see if you might be experiencing that. According to the American Psychiatry Association, an estimated 7 to 10% of bereaved adults will experience the persistent symptoms of prolonged grief disorder. And among children and adolescents who have lost a loved one, approximately 5 to 10% will experience depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, or prolonged grief disorder following their bereavement. So here are some symptoms of prolonged grief disorder. I'm going to just read these through. Identity disruption, such as feeling as though part of oneself has died. Marked sense of disbelief about the death. Avoidance of reminders that the person is dead. Intense emotional pain, such as anger, bitterness, sorrow related to the death. Difficulty with reintegration, such as problems with engaging with friends, pursuing interests, planning for the future. Emotional numbness, absence or marked reduction of emotional experience. Feeling that life is meaningless. Intense loneliness, feeling alone or detached from others. So, if you've experienced grief, you're like, well, I've had all of those. And yes, that may be true, but actually for a diagnosis of prolonged grief disorder, the loss of your loved one had to have occurred at least a year ago for adults and at least 6 months ago for children or adolescents. And you have to have experienced 3 of those symptoms that I mentioned nearly every day for at least the last month prior to the diagnosis. So even though you've experienced probably those symptoms at some point in your grieving process, it is unlikely that those are still occurring a year after the death of them, and that you're experiencing all of those symptoms, or at least 3 of those symptoms every day for at least 30 days. So just keep that in mind. There's a self-assessment link in the show notes. Let's end this portion of grief, this difficult journey of grief, with some practical steps for a healthy grieving process. Okay? So, I am not saying that if you follow these tips that you are not going to feel grief. I'm saying you're going to feel grief. You're going to feel all the yucky emotions that nobody likes to feel or wants to feel. However, these things are going to help you. You don't necessarily, I don't think you have to do all of them, but implementing some in your life will help you move through the process in a healthy way. And so we're not trying to get rid of the grief. We're trying to process through the grief in a healthy way, okay? Number 1, tell the story of death and effects of it on your life. It's important if you're going through grief that you talk about the person that you've lost. You talk about the effect that they've had on your life, the profound effect that they've had on other people. This is very important. It's a way to honor them, and bringing honor to our loved one that has passed is healing. Number 2, understand the grief process and the effects of loss. Grief is not one and done. There may be times in your life that you feel it again. It may not be as intense as you felt it when it first happened, but things like weddings or births of children are going to be times where you miss that person desperately. So just note that. It is important that we understand the grief process because that helps us work through it and helps remind ourselves that we're normal and this is a part of life here. Some great places to help you understand. You can Google most anything, right? We can Google about the grief process and the effects that loss has on our life. But a couple good resources, H. Norman Wright. He is an expert in grief, grieving, and loss. He has written some wonderful books, and I encourage you, if you haven't read a book by him and you've gone through grief, he's a great resource to have. So H. Norman Wright, he's got quite a few books. He's got his own website too that's even got a lot of resources on there. So I encourage you to check him out. There's also some grief support groups. One's called Grief Share, and that is a great resource for people to plug into, and you can go through this process in a healthy way and learn about grief. Also, there is a gentleman by the name of Kevin Ellers, Ellers, I believe, and he has a workbook on Amazon that can help you work through some processes of grief also. Number 3, identify the stages of grief that you have felt so far. So as we talked about grief, like just being a healthy person in general, if we're able to identify our emotions, that is an important part of being healthy, and it doesn't change in the grief process. We want to be able to identify different feelings that we're having at different times. That just helps us be healthy. So we know, oh, this is a normal part of grieving, is I'm feeling angry at that person, at myself, at God. That is normal. Number 4, verbalize your feelings or emotions. This is an important part of being a healthy person in general. Also, is verbalizing our feelings. We can do this through a journal. We can do this with friends. We can do this through spoken prayer. Is talk and verbalize our feelings. This helps it get out of our body. Number 5, attend a grief support group. I mentioned Grief Share. Normally, if you look up hospice in your community, they'll normally host grief groups. You don't have to use the services of hospice to attend a grief support group. Just call them and they'll connect you with some resources. Number 6, be aware if you're avoiding the grief process and maybe identify what are those obstacles. Once you identify why you're avoiding the process or what obstacles you have, then it's important to remove them so you can, again, move through. Number 7, refocus on what life looks like without them. What did they do for me? How am I going to manage that myself now? Or how am I going to have others help me to do these things? So if you have a loved one that was really close to you and they helped you with lots of things, like they paid all the bills or they took care of the car maintenance or they did all these things and now they're gone, you have to kind of look like, okay, these are the things I'm going to have to learn how to do, or I'm going to have to hire someone them to do them, or have some friends help me with these things. You have to begin to look at life a little differently now. You have to look at what life looks like without them. So we're not going to stick our head in a hole, right? We're going to figure out what life looks like now. Number 8, if we have feelings of guilt or we're stuck in anger, we need to be intentional about working through those, especially if there's some sense of unforgiveness. If the bitterness or anger is coming from unforgiveness, it's that we work through that process. I do have an episode on forgiveness, so if you want to go back and check that out, if that's something that you're struggling with. Number 9, express unsaid things through a letter or an empty chair or at the gravesite. So it's important that those things that you feel like you didn't get to say, it's important to get those things out. So we can write them a letter. We can set up an empty chair and talk to them like they were there, or we can go to the gravesite and talk to them there. So it's important that we're getting whatever is left unsaid, we're getting that said. Number 10, talk about the loved ones with other family members through memories. It is important that we don't just never speak of them because we're scared we're going to cry or we're scared we're going to upset someone. It's very important that we honor their life, especially through good memories. And it's great to do that at family gatherings. Maybe you have a special dish that they liked, or you just share some stories of like, wouldn't they think that was the funniest thing? Things like that. It can be hard, and people may shed some tears. You might shed a tear. It's still an important part of the grieving process.
Do you want to teach your children godly traits such as kindness, gratitude, and forgiveness? The Red Ball is a story of Renata, a young girl who receives a special gift. When that gift goes missing, she is left to figure out what to do. Through her journey, she learns a lot about herself and what forgiveness really means. The lessons found in the book can be made even more meaningful with the Red Ball Companion Activity Book, featuring over 30 activities. Both books are the perfect addition to any homeschool curriculum or as a thoughtful anytime story. Get your copy today and help your child build a heart that reflects Jesus.
Number 11, when coming up on new days without the loved one, like the anniversary of death or birthdays or holidays that we mentioned earlier, it is important to make a plan on how you're going to spend that day and choose something you can do to honor them, or that's going to really bring some good feelings for you. It is so important that you make a plan. Don't just sit around and dread the day is coming. Make a plan for the day. I promise you it's going to help you feel a lot better. It may, most certainly it's still going to be a sad day, but it is going to give you an underlying sense of peace when you have a plan for the day. I can't tell you how many people have let these days slide in without any preparation, and it has really affected them hard, much harder than if someone has a plan. They're going to go here, they're going to release some balloons, they're going to go to the graveside, they're going to volunteer at their favorite place, they're going to do something that helps them honor that loved one. Maybe they're going to take the day off work, whatever. Number 12, if your grieving seems to be interfering with your daily functioning, it might be helpful to set up a grieving time. So if you listen to the last episodes on worry, I talked about a coping skill called worry time. And this is basically a time that you set aside to worry. And in the grieving process, you set aside a time to grieve. So if you're having a hard time getting through the day, which will be typical, it's very normal and common for that to be in the early days. But if you're 3 months down the road and you're still having a hard time functioning at your job or just getting things done, maybe setting aside a grieving time would be helpful. So that day from 7 to 8 p.m., you're just going to set aside a time to cry, to think, to be depressed, to just get all in your feelings. And that way, during the day, as these waves come, you can go, okay, I'm just going to set that aside, and we're going to come tonight, and I'm going to think about that and process that and just let myself feel it. Number 13, look for ways to honor your loved one. And this can be serving at their favorite charity, making a donation to their charity, making good choices in life, doing things with your life that honor them. Number 14, this is a spiritual one. Pray, read the Bible, find some scriptures that are helpful to lean on. It is so important to be spiritually disciplined at this time. And this is going to be really hard. It's going to be hard to pray. It's going to be hard to read the Word. But be open with God as you pray about your feelings. Tell Him you don't have the words to say. Ask Him to lead you to Scripture that's helpful. But reading Scripture is going to remind you of God's promises. It's going to give you hope. It's going to give you gratitude. It's going to help us look for things to thank God for, even as we are brokenhearted. Number 15, keep a regular routine as much as possible. Try to get back into a regular schedule or routine as soon as you are able to do that. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. You're going to have a hard time concentrating. You're going to have a hard time remembering things. You may seem a little scattered, but just know that's normal, but it's important and it's healthy that you get back to the things that God has created for you to do. And it is going to help your mental health in the long run as well. Number 16, maintain good sleep, exercise, and eating. So you're going to take care of yourself physically. Make sure you're eating in a healthy way. Ensure you're sleeping at least 8 hours a night and exercising in some way once a day. In previous episodes, we talked about creating healthy coping skills. This is why it's so vital that we have these healthy things integrated into our life every day. So when these big things happen in our life, that we've already got good things to lean on. This is going to help us move through whatever situation in a healthier way. So if trauma comes, if death of a loved one comes, if major stress comes or anxiousness comes, or we have got our life in a way that's healthy already, and that's going to help us move through things in a healthier way. Number 17, socialize. This is important in all times of our life, but especially important when we are struggling emotionally. So maybe having coffee with a friend, joining an extra Bible study so it'll help you engage with others, asking someone to lunch, doing something to socialize. As we mentioned, this is an important part of being healthy in our everyday life, and it's especially important when we're going through something extremely difficult also. Number 18, ask for help. If you need help practically or emotionally, please reach out to someone for help. Like, this is so hard for us to do, right? But people want to help. People care about you and me, and they want to help. We have to just step on our pride a little bit and be humble and ask people for help. Ask God for help. Just put people in your life so you can lean on them. Don't worry, you can pay them back someday. But for now, allow yourself to lean on the people that God has put in your life. Number 19, give others grace. I know, but I preach this all the time because people aren't going to respond perfectly to you. If you've experienced a hard time in your life, I know I have. I'm sure you have. People are going to say and do all the wrong things. Loss, death, grief, it can make others feel really uncomfortable, and it will often lead them to say and do things that just seem frankly insensitive. But we have to know, and we have to remind ourselves that people do care. Sometimes they're just awkward because they don't know how to show it or to say it. We have to give people grace. We can't just walk around angry because people aren't responding to us in the right way. People aren't going to say the right things. They're going to say things that are insensitive. I have been shocked at some of the things that I have heard people say, but honestly, I've probably said insensitive things too. Well, I'm going to take that back. I know I've said insensitive things, not on purpose, but just because I had nothing else to say and something just come out of my mouth. So have grace for people. Know that they do care, and you're just going to have to not be easily offended and try to easily forgive. I know it's hard. You're already having a hard time, but it is important to give people grace. And number 20 is to wait before you make big decisions. I know that a lot of decisions have to be made, especially in the early months of someone passing, and depending on if it was a spouse or a child or a parent, like, you do have to make lots of decisions. But if it can wait, I would encourage you to wait a bit to make big decisions. I'm a big encourager of don't make decisions in the midst of emotions, when you're having a lot of big and a lot of emotions, it's not a good time to be making decisions in. So if you can prolong some decisions, I would encourage you to do that and wait till you're feeling a little bit more stable cognitively to do that. So that is 20 practical steps to have a healthy grieving process. Again, you can do all those things. It doesn't mean you're not going to hurt and you're not going to grieve and you're not going to have a hard time. But these things will hopefully help you go through the process in a healthier way. Also, there can be some really helpful grieving exercises that you can do that are in some different grieving books. And if you can find a book that's written by some professionals, people that have worked in the grief field for a long time, I would encourage you to do that. When professionals share what they know, like these things that I've shared, that's because I've worked with people grieving for many years. So generally, those things work. Now, not all things work for every individual, but just generally speaking, those things will be helpful. Let's close today's episode with some scripture, some that I find encouraging from Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 8. You'll probably find it very familiar. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Healthy people understand there are seasons in life, seasons that are hard and seasons to move forward, to laugh, to dance, to heal, to mend. Life moves forward no matter whether we want it to or not. The morning comes, the sun sets, the tides come in and goes out. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and 14 say, "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope. For we believe that Jesus died and rose again, and so we believe that God will bring with Jesus those who have fallen asleep in him." That, friends, is really good news for believers. We believe that when we die, that we are with Jesus, and all those who have put their faith in Jesus will be with him when they leave this life. We have hope. We know truth, and we know we serve a good, faithful, and compassionate God. It is vital to always be working on learning about God and the truths as he shared in the Bible, because this is going to help us not get stuck in the loss, but get stuck in the hope. We know this world is but for a moment of time in eternity. We grieve, yes, but we must grieve with hope as our foundation, because we don't grieve like the man who has no hope. We grieve like a person who has hope, and our hope is in Jesus Christ. This is from Revelation 21, 3 through 4. "And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Remember, we can rejoice because we are moving closer to a time where there will be no more mourning, no more death, no more crying. All will be made right as it was intended from creation. This is what we can rest our hope in. God intended us for life. He didn't intend for us to have tears or pain or death. And we're going to be able to rest in him. Meanwhile, you can know that God is with you. He loves you and he hurts with you. He will comfort you, though, if you let him, and he will bring you joy again. Friends, thank you so much for joining me. If you found this or any episode helpful, please let me know. You can do that through email or text, and that link is in the show notes. If you can leave a rating or a review about the show wherever you listen, that would be so helpful to me. Or if this episode has been helpful, you can share it with a friend. Hey, did you know that I have Healthy and Redeemed merch? Yeah, short for merchandise. Go to my website, writtenbyhealy.com. Under the tab Podcast, scroll about halfway down, and there you're going to find a sweatshirt, a long sleeve shirt, and a thermos. I love my thermos. It's a good one. Now, let's go out into this big God-created world and live healthy and redeemed, reflecting Jesus Christ rightly in all that we do. Thanks again for taking the time to be here with me. Lord willing, I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. The information provided is to be used as a resource. If you have a serious mental issue, we would encourage you to contact a therapist in your state.